Дорогі глядачі, продовжуємо сьогоднішню передачу контакту. Тут записано в нашій мобільній студії на 27-му трирічному конгресі українців Канади у Манітоба. І сьогодні маємо привілей поговорити з колишньою сенаторкою канадського уряду паною Рейнел Андрейчук із Саскачевану, яка була председником панелю на тему Human Rights тут на цьому конгресі. So, Senator Raynell, welcome back to being together.
Thank you.
Very, very nice. Now, you are a specialist in human rights in many aspects on a global scale. And you were the panelist here in this session at the 27th Congress here in Manitoba. What do you feel that your panel achieved at this important time with the war happening and everything being a lot more poignant than normal?
Well, I should tell you that I was the moderator, and we had two excellent panelists. We had our ambassador to the United Nations, Bob Ray, and we also were privileged to hear from Andreychuk, who just won on behalf of her organization, which I will look at. It's her Ukrainian Civil Liberties Group, and they won the Peace Prize. She works on the ground. She worked through Maidan. She is a lawyer. She has worked with OSC, so she has a great understanding of Eastern Europe and particularly, obviously, country. She's a human rights defender, her organization. It's a civil society. So we had the governmental perspective from Canada and the United Nations, and then we had her perspectives of a citizen of Ukraine who cares deeply for justice, for human rights, and to save lives in this middle of this war.
So what do you think in terms of how should Ukraine be pursuing this issue of human rights, and how do we globally support that issue? How do we bring to the fore the atrocities that are happening on television in front of our eyes right now?
Well, I think for every citizen in Canada, especially, whether you're Ukrainian or not, this is the first time that we are almost seeing every step of a war. We hear, and it isn't that we don't care about other parts of the world, but other parts of the world are not as equipped to have the technologies, the understanding, and to the credit of the Ukrainian people and how they developed, they have brought the war to us graphically, and we see innocent civilians dying. We see soldiers needlessly having to defend their country. This is an invasion, an unlawful invasion, and it just didn't start February 24th. There has been this tension for centuries, we know. That's too complex to talk about. But the invasion into Georgia, 2008, we dealt with it on trying to find some common ground with Russia. It did not work. Then Crimea, 2014, annexed illegally. And then, of course, the Donbass. And I like to quote, because it's so graphic, that to my understanding, at least 14,000 Ukrainians lost their lives between 2014 and February 24th. And we're not sure how many Russians lost there. So this invasion has been with us, but it came so graphically February 24th when Putin announced that Ukraine is an inalienable part of their history and culture, and took it upon himself to invade Ukraine. By the words that he used, and I will quote them, he said, Ukraine is not just a neighboring country, it is an inalienable part of our own history, culture, and space. Therefore, he said, Ukraine is not an independent country. Ukraine's culture is just really part of our culture. and therefore it leads to a genocidal aggression. And those people who care about justice, care about freedom, care about inalienable rights of people to determine their destiny, we end up with an aggressor who is a power sitting on the United Nations with a veto, and we see Ukrainians daily, civilians dying and soldiers dying. But to the credit of the spirit of the Ukrainians, they're winning. And we have a duty in Canada to support them. Right now, it is a military, humanitarian need, and we have to do more, because as they are fighting for the things we believe in, where will this aggression stop? Will it destroy sovereign states? Because we built over decades trying to say sovereign states are inalienable, they determine their destiny, and no one has the right to invade. No more might is right. And we're at a very difficult point right now in our societies on this very question, because it isn't just Russia we're talking about. It's the readjustment of the international order, which would diminish the things that we believe in, freedom, justice, etc. So right now it is a military, it's humanitarian, and it's to support civilians. But there are levers in the international court that we can use now. The bigger question, which our panel was trying to address, is how do you bring an aggressor, such as Putin is doing now, to justice? And so we do have the International Criminal Court, we have the International Court in The Hague, we have levers within the European sphere, PACE it's called, we have the United Nations. They all have their pluses and minuses, and to the credit of the Ukrainians, they are working within that international order to use every lever that they can use now, looking to the future when they win the war, and we're all convinced they will and should, and we have a moral obligation to support them, that how to get at justice for these people who are dying and to protect the country of Ukraine. So is it to be some sort of new tribunal? Is it to use the international court, the international justice? Do we try the UN? But of course, Russia has a veto there. Or do we develop new ones? I think the panel, Mr. Ambassador Ray and Ms. Andreychuk, think we have to use all of them. And they have, if they were to handle it within Ukraine, it may be that some of their laws would be found wanting. But usually, like the International Court, I worked with that quite extensively to bring it into being. The country has to be equipped to handle it. If it can't, then an international tribunal can take over, and that's the ICC court, also in The Hague. But that, we want countries to determine what is justice for them. And so there's no peace without justice, no justice without peace. How do we get to a finality here? And it can't be a capitulation. It can't be acknowledging that pieces of Ukraine don't belong to Ukraine. I could go on forever. So I think you're getting the idea of justice being very important. Civilians being killed, and we're seeing it right away. This is against every moral rule, every person, a thinking person, should know civilians are innocent. They cannot be used as pawns in a war.
So now you've summed everything up, and now the next.
I'm sorry.
No, it's perfect. Now the next question is, considering your work, long-term work in the International Criminal Court, what are, regardless of which path anyone chooses, what are the chances of actually creating that justice outcome in that court?
Those processes are already starting. The International Court, the prosecutor is already engaged in determining what is going on in Ukraine. The really interesting thing in this case, as opposed to other genocides, Ukraine started from day one to collect evidence. They understand the rule of law. So they have prosecutors, they've engaged the broader international community to save the evidence. So when Bucha occurred, for example, prosecutors were there collecting the evidence because we don't want it to be just an assumption of injustice or genocide. We have to have a process where everyone gets to identify the issues from them, and then the court would decide. So they're already starting all this. They're already going to the international court. So they've started the process. So it's not a question of which one to choose. I think they will, and we have to know all have weaknesses, all have strengths, because every issue is different and every definition of justice is different. So I presume with Ukraine, they're already starting to protect, but it's to tell people this will take time. We have to protect witnesses, because we found in other cases that when we start into the trial process, the witnesses are vulnerable by those perpetrators. They used horrific means to gain access to a country, and now when they're being held accountable for it, they're still out there somewhere, or some of the parts are. So we need to protect the evidence, protect the witnesses, make sure that we have a fair trial system, because we believe in due process. So these will take time, they're intricate. The Ukrainians are engaged with that, and they've reached out to the international community for the assistance. So how it will develop, only time will tell. And then you change it if it's not working as well. South Africa started with a truth and justice reconciliation model, which worked very well for them to maintain a peace. But individuals said, I want justice, and they went to the courts. So it's a long-term issue to ensure that it never happens again. Because when we say never happens again, look, it's happening. 2022. Who would have believed that so many lives would be lost? A country would be invaded. And there are losses on the Russian side, needlessly too, because someone believes something that is aggression, taking over another country.
Well, Senator, thank you. Thank you very much. Дорогі глядачі, перейдемо до наступної частини нашої передачі після перерви. Це була розмова із сенатором Andreychuk, яка була керівницею панелю на тему людських прав під час 27-ї конвенції трирічної Конгресу українців Канади. Дуже вам дякую.